Very much for stopping by the Digital Creator Daily. If you're new here, I'm Rob from Hey Summit, and this is the daily-ish show where I get to have some awesome conversations with brilliant people doing really interesting things. We talk about the creator mindset, staying authentic, assembling your toolkit, exploring platforms, and a whole lot more. It's a pretty relaxed show about and for creators, thought leaders, and independent entrepreneurs. And just as a reminder, conversation is best when it's shared. So regardless of how you're tuning in, whether it's live right now or listening to the podcast later on, please feel free to jump in and share your thoughts, your questions, your perspectives. And thanks very much for spending a bit of time with us. So I'm really happy to welcome Anfernee Chansamooth to the show. Anfernee is a content strategist, a copywriter, and a podcaster. His company, Simple Creative Marketing, is known for creating case studies and epic posts to drive traffic for web businesses and their owners so that they don't have to. He typically works with $1 million plus services and software businesses that also sell online training. Anfernee, thank you so much for taking some time to chat with me today.
Thanks for the invite, and I'm glad to be here, Rob.
So I really want to get into content and copy, especially like the title of today's chat about AI replacing copywriters. But first, I think just because we have you here, I'd love to learn a little bit about or share a little bit about your specific story as a creator and building your business and taking the time to do it properly. So I know that you started off in the corporate world, and you decided to, and you were there for a while, and you decided to switch gears and kind of go off on your own. I'm really just interested in the mindset of like what was the thought process in your decision to do that? Had you always wanted to run something on your own? Were you running side projects before? Like, what's your story, and how did you get from there to here?
So I've always, I wouldn't say that I always wanted to run my own business or come down the path of a creator. I think for me, like I did enjoy writing poetry, and in high school, this is a bit funny to say it now, but I actually enjoyed reading Hamlet when I was doing that in 12th grade, and just exploring language in that way. But I never saw myself as a writer, or I didn't. Back then, I had no idea what a copywriter was, or a content writer. That phrase wasn't even around when I started my career. So I kind of followed the traditional path of going through, getting my university degree. I had my background was in programming, so doing like web languages and things like this. But also the degree was actually a business degree, so I learned information management and some other communication skills and whatnot. So I went. The year I graduated was 2000, and it was just during the .com had just busted. So that was a time where it was the worst time to graduate with an IT degree. Like trying to get a job, it took me almost 2 years to land my first job at that point in time. And so I was just developing skills in the background. I was working at first at McDonald's, and then that was my first job. And then the second job was working for American Express doing consumer credit cards, and really just learning more about customer service and taking phone calls, high volume. We were doing like 100 calls a day in an 8-hour shift, right? So if you've never done that before, it's intense, especially when, 50+% of the people calling are frustrated and angry at you, right? So that kind of made me, I guess, want to leave that kind of role, but also explore an opportunity to work, utilize the skills I've been learning with my degree. So that led me to HP, which is obviously a Fortune 100 company, one of the largest global corporates in the world. And I went in as a call center representative, taking calls again, but now we were, instead of doing 100 calls, we're doing 40 calls a day. So I had time to breathe. And I was honestly, I was getting bored, and I was twiddling my thumbs between calls. And I said to my manager at the time, I said, have you got any other work for me to do? And she said, well, we have this internet, and there's no one here who has any web skills, and you've got a web, like you've been learning this thing at university. Do you want to actually update our internet? Right? And I said, sure, okay. And thinking back now, this is 2003 when I was going through this experience. That's when I started to, I guess, touch content, or this idea of what we call content now. It was, how can I put things up on this website that other team members and in other departments would want to read, right? And I don't know about you, Rob, and anyone watching this, but most people don't read anything on a corporate internet site. Like, it's just not exciting, right? And so that was the challenge. And so the idea I came up with was actually, well, what if we use the site as a place to drive people to actually win things, right? So if we had a reward and recognition program that, you know, had prizes attached to it and people could utilize this in the teams, then that would give them a reason to go and visit the site. Okay, so and that actually became a success. So we launched this new program within the organization or the department I was in, you know, and that became the first, I guess, proactive type of marketing activity that I actually you know, designed, and that was, you know, that kind of intuitively led me down a path of, okay, I'd like to do more of these type of projects. What is this? Now, 2009, I was still working for HP, but I had essentially there was a lot of work. I was doing about 6 hours a week, burning out, you know, partying on the weekend, just drowning my sorrows in alcohol and other things that probably shouldn't be mentioned. But it wasn't just me. It was my, like, the team that I was in, and also the other teams, and also directors and people were like, I was seeing this everywhere, man. Like, it was just a very toxic environment. And I'm not gonna, like, you know, throw out like it's only a HP thing, and I'm sure, you know, they might have evolved since then, whatever, but it was not great. And I ended up in hospital for 2 months with a brain surgery, due to the stress, due to all of that compounding over the number of years I was there. And then that's when I felt had the space and the time to actually sit there and think about, well, what am I doing with my life, right? Like, do I, you know, continue chasing the money, but being completely unfulfilled? And what's the point of having money when you can't use it and you've got no time to do anything and your health's down the drain, right? Like it just doesn't make sense. And so I actually ended up coming out of hospital and then booking a one-way ticket to Toronto, Canada. And I spent the next 2 years, or I had 1 year there before the GFC hit, and then HP basically made me redundant due to a corporate restructure, which aligned with where I was headed internally anyway. Like, I was feeling it was I need to get out of this. Yeah. And that forced me, I was in this weird situation where my visa I was still able to stay in the country for another year, but legally I couldn't work for another company because the visa was a sponsored visa by that company, the one that brought me there, right? And so it was actually a housemate of mine who said, hey, you know, like, if you've been teaching, you know, volunteer teaching salsa dancing on the weekends at this church, why don't you do it out of our living room? And you know, and maybe that could be a thing. And so, you know, I found this site called meetup.com, which is, you know, a lot of people know it now, but back then it was quite new. And created this, what did I call it? I called it Beginner Salsa Toronto or something. And within 2 weeks, I had 200 members, right? And the next week, I listed the first event and said, hey, come to this address. I didn't mention that it was my house because I didn't want people to know that. And then, you know, I had my hat and I put it out and I said, okay, just drop whatever you want in the hat and I'll teach you for an hour. And I got, you know, the first 5 students came through the door, and then week over week that compounded. And, you know, within the next 3 months, I had, you know, 10, as much as our living room could take. And then that actually led to opportunities to teach salsa at organizations. So some of those students referred me to their companies and said, hey, why don't you come in and, you know, teach for our company? And so I did that for a while as a sort of a side, we call it a side hustle now. But back then it was just like, I just need to pay the rent, man. That's my motivation. Exactly. And then whilst I was doing it during the day, I was volunteering for a non-profit actually, and I was learning Twitter, Facebook. I was learning this thing called digital marketing, social media marketing, and developing those skills and doing courses and all these things, that, you know, absorbing as much as I could back then. And that led to my first consulting gig. And I actually was hired to be a social media consultant for a web design company. And they'd been around for like 10 years. And I met this guy randomly on a cruise, and he just said, hey, man, like, I need someone to come and consult to my clients on social media. I don't know that stuff. You do. Come and talk to them. And so that was the first gig. And I want to give Andy a shout out to that, because that first opportunity gave me hope that there was a path for me. Right. And I want to, like, speak to the listeners right now and say, look, I never did a formal marketing degree. So if you feel like you have to go and do that 3 years of invest, 30 grand in doing that, whatever it is, in your local currency, I'm here to tell you, and I'm not the only story, because I know there's actually a whole bunch of other people around me who have similar stories where they've never done the formal degree. They've learned, through their experience. And I'm not going to argue it's better either way. I think it's different for different people, but certainly that I've learned from experimentation and a lot of failures, and I know that's something that you want us to talk about here as well.
I think so. I love this story. I see a few things, a few kind of common threads within it. It seemed like there's especially for those kind of maybe listening who are still in a corporate job and they're thinking, do I do a side project? Do I go off on my own? It sounds like you've always had an interest in, first off, overworking, but second, like doing things that trying to understand how what makes the difference between someone checking something or not, or tuning in or not, taking, God love you. You go to the corporate intranet and you think, okay, yeah, that's going to be the place where I'm going to really show my chops here. So has there always been this, the way that you tell it, it almost sounds almost inevitable that, okay, well, you have this kind of thread of trying to maybe understand the levers of what it takes to be, to get someone interested in whatever it is that you're providing in front of them. Was that conscious, or have you only kind of recognized that in the rearview mirror?
I think it's more the latter, and that in realizing it through the review. I remember going through an experience when I was going through that transition from corporate into freelancing, or whatever you want to call that.
Yeah.
I actually spoke to my best friend at the time, and she actually said to me, what she observed from me was, I'm the type of guy who always loves to teach things. For me, I would, even in my corporate job, I would stick around an hour after my shift was done. I wasn't getting paid, but I would just want to help another colleague learn something, right? And that's something that has stayed with me to today. And now my wife talks about that and says, hey, you got to give, you just give away so much, and you got to be careful, because it's that can lead to that burnout phase. And so for me, it's actually the common thread is teaching. So going back through high school, uni, all of that, my career, it's always been, how can I teach concepts? How can I love to learn. So I'm always reading, listening to things, and all, doing workshops and all of that, experimenting. But at the same time, I also like to take what I know and then teach that and impart that knowledge and wisdom to others. Because I feel that's where my strength is. And that's come naturally. Like, that's not something I've consciously
do it in your sleep anyway. Yeah,
because I think that's good, because if I had known that when I was in high school, I might have gone down a path of becoming a teacher, like in the education system. And I know now that actually wouldn't work for me, because I'd be fighting against the system. Like, I'd be going, this system sucks, and I don't agree with it. I had that experience. I volunteered in Laos in 2009, 2010 when I went there. Spent 2 years there after my mother passed away. It was my impetus to actually go back to my homeland, so to speak, and reconnect with that culture and that community. And I actually volunteered, for a primary school. Well, they were like kindergarten through to eighth grade schoolers, and I was teaching English. Right now, the thing I didn't like was actually grading them. Like, I hated that process. It was like, why am I grading these kids? And I just felt it was not an effective process. Right. I was crushing some of their souls because they wanted to learn how to speak a language, and it was like, no. And the thing I picked up on that during that experience, Rob, was it was actually what we call the naughty kids who actually learned the fastest, because they weren't afraid of judgment. They were, for them, it was like, I'm just going to say whatever it is and make people laugh, and I don't care if the other kids laugh at me. And then what we realized was, as teachers, we found out actually those kids, they're actually doing better, in terms of the language skills than the other ones who were more academic and who could do the grammar tests and give you, like great results there. But when you ask them to say, like, have a conversation with me, they were too scared, right? And they were worried about getting it perfect.
I think that's a really interesting point, because that is a lot like starting off on your own anyway. And you definitely see this in different people who are building their own businesses. You have those who are like, I got to get this right. I got to do everything correctly. If something goes wrong, clearly something's wrong. Therefore, I have to stop everything. I have to start over, or maybe I'm not. Maybe this isn't for me. And you have the people who screw up all the time, and as you said, like maybe they screw up and they love learning through it. And everyone, I think the whole like celebrating failure, I think that's a little bit overdone in terms of how people are seeming to be proud of that in some weird way. But learning from failure and having that as part of the process is incredibly important. Otherwise, you don't come across as human, but also you don't actually end up learning what it is that you're doing. And I think that one of the things that I admire about you in terms of the way that you put out content, the way that you speak to your audience, is that authenticity, and that not rawness from a watch me as I cut my hand building a house, but it's that rawness in terms of like really being authentic, taking the term of authenticity to a realistic light. And including some smaller things. Like I love how you write emails every once in a while saying, hey, is this still relevant to you? If it's not relevant to you, like bounce. It's really okay. I wonder then, just in thinking of learning and your love of learning, and maybe your love of learning, especially after stuff doesn't go right. Are there specific examples that, like, especially maybe when you were just starting out, that maybe were devastating at the time in terms of you thinking like, this is the thing, this is going to work, and it just didn't?
Absolutely. So let me tell you, for me to become a professional copywriter where I'm getting paid, a good salary, let's say, to write for a living and to write for others, it took me 9 years to get to this point, right? When I started my first blog, and this is because of my interest in growing and learning, I'd heard about this thing called, what was it back then? It was, I'm trying to remember the platform. It was even before WordPress existed. There was blogger.com. Before that, there was GeoCities, right? If you remember.
GeoCities, loved it. GeoCities.
Animated GIFs everywhere, and, autoplay audio files and all these things that, now we'd go, oh, that's terrible UX. But we loved it back then, right? So, and we were on dial-up, man. Like, you didn't have time to, it was just a completely different world. And I started writing this blog thing because I just wanted to learn the technology. I wanted to learn, what is this thing? Why is this blogger.com taking off? What is this? And so I started to write, and it really was a personal journal. And for me, it was my self-therapy. It was just a space where I could, dump whatever was going through my head, as I was going through my career, and just learn the platform, learn the technology at the same time. And, and I was writing for an audience of one. I wasn't writing because I thought, oh, this is going to be an amazing blog and I would have literary agents come after me. It certainly wasn't that. And over time, I just then started to see an audience build up. There was, I remember the first time someone sent me put a comment back in the days when we actually put comments in blogs. Someone actually left a comment and said, oh, this is really great. I resonate with this message, or whatever it was. And I thought, wow, like, here's someone on the other side of the world, and they just like took the time to say hello. And I thought that was amazing. But then what was going through my mind was, well, how can I do more of this? How can I actually turn this into a career, as opposed to sitting here and taking 100 calls a day? Where can I do that transition? And I didn't work it out. It took me years to work that out. And I tried different blogs, launching different blogs, and WordPress came about. So I had to learn how to use WordPress, self-hosted versus free, all these different things. And then social media, I totally sucked at Twitter. I remember watching this guy. There's a guy called Scott Stratton. I don't know if you know of him or his books. He's a bit of an influencer over in the Canadian market. And he did 1 month of straight Twitter. He was on there 10 hours a day, didn't eat, and he just tweeted. He had something like 10,000 tweets in a month, something ridiculous. But he built his audience that way. It was the Wild West, and he actually then went out and did the speaking engagements, and I saw him talk, and he said, the key is to really just pick your one social platform, really delve into it, and really focus on adding value, right? And it's flying about so much now, I know, and you hear it all the time, Rob, what is add value? Everyone says add value, but how do you actually do that? And so I had to actually work out, okay, the thing that I'm writing, does it resonate with the type of person who's actually wanting that as something that's going to solve a problem, right? And there's a difference between, and I actually gave this advice to a university graduate last month. They hit me up on LinkedIn and said, "Hey, Anf, I like that you've been doing this professionally. How can I get into that world?" The best thing you can do is to build your portfolio and write about different topics and find your space, because you can't write about everything. But what are your interests? How can you write about those things? And that's what I actually started to do. I started to write about software companies. I started to write about business, small business. And and my shortcut, or the fast track to learning and growth in that space, was to actually do what you're doing. Interview the people who've had the experience, right? Actually bring them on. And I didn't launch it as a podcast. That's not what I did, because I didn't know anything about that back then. I just recorded them, like a old school recorder, and was just like asking questions and say, "Hey, tell me about your journey. What did you learn? What were the mistakes? These things." And then I turned those into articles and I put them on a site, right? And then started sharing those out through Facebook and sharing those out through Twitter. And I started to build an audience that way. And then there was a point where it came to, I actually launched in 2012. So I'd gone overseas. I'd come back from that Canadian experience, run out of money. This is what happens, right? You run out of money and you go, okay. So I went back to Australia, and then I actually met a guy at an event that I went to, which, funnily enough, was called Escape Your Day Job. And so he's, we sat down, for a coffee, and I said, "Hey, you do Facebook ads. I do social media. Should we do something together?" And he said, "Yeah, totally." And so we teamed up, and the next 2 years we were running a Facebook ad agency. We hit 6 figures of that business, but the biggest lesson, and this is why the business failed, we had no idea about salaries and paying each other wages. Sort of thing. It was like, we were appearing all over the local market, doing talks every week and things like this. And so from the outside, and this is what I hate when people do podcasts, and it's like, "I've just done 7 or 8 figures, blah, 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 I've done this amazing launch." And so, yeah, right. And for me, it's like, "Okay, now tell me about your profit margin. Actually tell me, did you pay your bills last month?" Right. So you got to be careful with that messaging. And so I appreciate you asking real questions and bringing us back to, well, tell the truth. And I also want to acknowledge just your comment about me being authentic. And there's a reason why I do that, because for me, I feel there's too much of one side of, yes, let's sell the dream. Entrepreneurship's great. Become a creator. Do all these things. I just want people to know that it's hard as F to do this, what we do. It's not as simple as get the business model canvas and away you go. It literally is, like I shared with you before we started, it took me 6 years to find what I'm calling my product market fit. Where I'm getting a regular income salary, I'm paying a team member, I've got these things in place. Now I'm building systems, right? So that's the journey I've been on.
That's all amazing stuff, and I think that it's there's a lot in that I think the people who have found what it is that they're the value that they're bringing, there's this kind of comfort in the and confidence in the way that you talk about the journey, that I think for those who are watching that maybe don't feel like that, because they feeling like anytime someone says, "I can't work with you," they think that that's a failure, a personal failure.
Mm-hmm.
They see it as, you're choosing to not work for me because you don't like me, because I'm the product, versus I'm choosing not to work with you because I don't need the service. And so I think it does take a long time and a lot of practice in order to get to where you are, but it also takes an approach that is kind of authentic from the beginning in order to make that a little bit more, I don't know, able to be dealt with, right?
Yeah.
Internally.
Yeah, there was a big lesson. I actually worked with a coach, when earlier on in the piece, 3 or 4 years ago, and he set a challenge for me, which was around his idea around value and pricing. And that's a huge challenge for a lot of, whether it's freelancers or even business owners. And it's how do I actually price my services in a way that I get paid and I'm comfortable and I can have a living, or if I want to scale and go through the scale phase and have enough capital to do that. And the challenge I learned was, every time you quote a new client, right, double your rate. Okay. And so this was huge for me, because, I went from offering free free everything. Like, I'll write for you for free, I'll coach you for free. Like, I just wanted the expertise and experience, and that's okay. Look, that's actually, it works. Okay, I'm evidence of that. You can actually, give away your work, right, in exchange for referrals, in exchange for testimonials, right? This happens in the software space. You give away free trial, right? It's common to do that. One thing that I would urge, people listening to do is also think about, well, what's the market value of the service that I'm providing? Let's look at what some of the competitors are doing. Let's also, when I'm pitching, right, also pay attention to your inner relationship with money. Okay. And this is something that's taken me a long time to work out. Is, I've got a story, as you do, and as the $1 billion investor has, they've got a story too. And you got to identify, okay, what is it for you? What was your parents' relationship to money look like? And did you have any mentors in your world that are, maybe they are rich and successful and wealthy financially, right? But maybe at an expense, maybe their relationships are falling apart. So there's always, there's a cost and there's a benefit, right? So for me, I had to learn, okay, well, right now I'm going to charge $500 for writing, a 500-word article, right? But my goal is within 12 months, I want that to be double, because unless I get there, I'm not going to generate enough profit for the business to sustain, right? And if it doesn't sustain, I got to go back and get another job. And I actually, we'll fill in a gap here, like between us failing the Facebook business to me launching what's now Simple Creative Marketing. I actually went back and got a job full time as a marketing manager here in Sydney for one of the largest co-working spaces here. And it was during that 2 years where I really learned the content, how to work with a team to generate content, right? At scale, and also to systemize all of that, and how to work with partners, and how to do interviews, how to put all the pieces together, how to promote, right? How to use ads and PPC and all these other things. So I had to learn these skills. And the nice thing about that experience was I'm getting paid to learn.
Exactly. Okay? Someone else is paying for it. Yeah. And as you say, like that wasn't a failure. That was an opportunity to bulk up in terms of your abilities and being able to, why would you have had a reason to do some of these things before? I think getting in the mindset of your customers or your eventual customers as well is super, super valuable. So I think that a lot of times people think, oh, well, if I want to be a creator, if I want to be an independent entrepreneur, then I can't take another job. I can't do another thing, because that's selling out to the man or whatever they're kind of thinking. And at the end of the day, like, it's about what as you say, I think that what is your relationship with money? What is it that you're trying to do, and why are you trying to do it? I think that a lot of people forget that why. They're like, no, I want to make $1 million this year. Well, why $1 million? What's the reason? Is there underlying either fear or ambition that motivates that, or is it literally just vacuous because you need something to focus on? I think that's really important.
Yeah, there've been studies that have been done around finances, and you ask, you walk on the street or Zoom, whatever you want to do, and you can ask 10 people what would be the ideal, how much you need to earn, for you to be happy, and most people will just straight up $1 million, right? There's no rationale for that. Yeah. Right? And then and the studies, and you can see that there've also been research that shows the general population, if they're making 50 or 70K a year, depending on which region you're in, that's enough. It pays it pays your bills. You have enough to go on holidays and take care of your family. Do charity work. That's what you care about. All these things. So you need to individualize that, and really, like, I love what you just said there, Rob, and just think about spreadsheet. If I had $100,000 or $1 million, where's that money going? And it's actually proven in terms of goal setting. If you're much clearer where the income is going, then you're more likely to hit the goal, right? If you're just going for some arbitrary number,
know the why.
You won't get there.
Yeah. As you said, why are you doubling your rate? Well, it's because by 12 months, you need to make it sustainable. Otherwise, something else might not happen. If you don't have that kind of clearly in front of you, it's not like a scare tactic, but it's like a motivation that, like, well, oh no, I remember why I'm increasing my prices. It's not because I'm somehow feeling like I'm doubly as effective. I need to get to a certain point, or I need to speak with a certain type of customer, and they won't be paying these rates. Yeah. I think that those underlying thoughts are really important. Speaking of kind of the wider space, though, I know that I'd love to talk for a few minutes just about tactics and get a little bit more tactical. in terms of our conversation, especially seeing that you are obviously in the copywriting space. And there are a lot of these tools that have been cropping up, tools, platforms that are taking what they call artificial intelligence. Some people think that it's varying degrees of this, and bringing artificial intelligence into the copywriting space. So I'd love to hear your thoughts just about that change, seeing as you're there, and especially gearing towards people who are building their businesses. How should they approach this whole new crop of AI powered or supposedly AI powered copywriting, either assistants or services?
Yeah, it's a great question, Rob. And the first time I started to really cast my eye towards what was happening with artificial intelligence was around September 2019. I actually recorded an episode on my podcast, which is the same topic, which actually was, will AI replace copywriters? And I was already at that time sort of hearing or seeing the writing on the wall. This technology is coming through. A lot of the larger corporates, they were already working with AI. They had already replaced some of their people, internal staff with AI technology. I'm name any of the largest media houses that you can think of, and I'll tell you, they've already got an arm or a department focused specifically on AI technology, right? And so, I knew or sensed that it would only be a matter of time before that's going to come into the consumer market, or to our level, where it's like, I'm a small business owner or a freelancer and I can touch that technology, and it's not going to cost me $10,000 a month just to play with the tool, right? This is where we are right now. I'm going to time mark it to August 2021, and right now there is already technology that is available that is AI powered or machine learning driven, right? And I'm not going to get into the tech behind all of that because I think that could go on forever. Let's just say there are tools out there that use smart technology that allow you to write copy or write content faster, okay, and really faster. And also, I would say it helps you with accuracy as well, because I can name some of the tools that I've been exploring, right? So, do you want me to get into the tool straight away, or do you want to talk?
Sure. I mean, well, I guess, what's the motivation for why someone would want to use this? Obviously, you're saying faster and more efficient, but is it really faster and more efficient, or does it just look like a robot wrote, like pulled together a whole bunch of random stuff?
I love it. I love the question. Let's start with, the benefits. Okay, so the reason why I wanted to explore it, other than my curious growth learning mindset, is, I was looking at, it typically takes me to write a long form piece of content, like an article, 2,000 words. That would typically take me even about 4 hours for the first draft. Okay, that's researching, that's brainstorming ideas, that's coming out with an outline, that's putting pen to paper or keyboard to whatever app I'm using, Notion right now. So and that would be 4 hours just to write the first draft. Okay, and then I would have to go through an editing phase and have to edit, and that I usually wait a day or two, let my brain sort of dwell on it for a while and then come back to it, or I give it to one of my editors and they do the edit, and then I would have to do the final edit before it goes to the client. Okay, so that's the typical workflow, and I've actually polled people on LinkedIn or other writers in the writing space, and they've said about similar things in terms of time frame. On average, someone who's been experienced and been doing it for a while would take them that amount of time. Now, someone who's not a writer, so who's just an entrepreneur, a business owner, an accountant, someone who's running a SaaS founder who doesn't do this kind of stuff, for them it could take them days. For them, it's like, I don't have the brain capacity or the skill to do that, right? It's like if you were to ask me, Rob, hey, let's whack out your accounting software right now and let's do your books, we could be here for days, right? Like that, what would take a bookkeeper half an hour?
Yeah,
I'd be here forever, right? So interesting enough, there's AI in the bookkeeping and accounting space too, but that's a different conversation. So so for me, it's like, okay, how can I actually speed up the process and find ways to get better and more accurate in terms of grammar, in terms of spelling, phrasing, writing in specific tones or specific nuances, right? These are the things that make content. Okay, so the promise of a tool, and there are a few in the market. There's Copy AI, there's Jarvis.ai, which was formerly Conversion.ai. There's a few other ones out there. These are copywriting tool software. Okay, so you fire up the software, you give it a brief. So the same way that you would give an external writer or a team member a brief, like here's the idea, and then here's a little couple of paragraphs around what I want you to focus on here and research on. You would give it the brief, and then you hit a button, and then it would actually generate and spit out words on a page, right? And so when I was testing it back in 2019, in September 2019, it was garbage, right? There was these tools, there was these websites you can go to, you could put a keyword in there, right? Hit the button, and it would spit out 3 pages of, like, it was illegible. It made no sense. And I just said, we're not there yet, right? Now, when I started testing this back in February 2021, I was blown away because the quality of the content that was coming back, right, was equal to me giving it to someone, whether it's to one of my junior team members, having them write the draft, right? So what I saw was, wow, okay, like this now we're at a phase where for the drafting, it can be quite efficient and quite effective. Now, the question you asked was, but is it really that fast if you compare it to your typical workflow? And the answer is no, right? For me right now, it still requires, and this is what I tell the people, it's not as simple as give it some keywords and hit go and you're done. Like you whatever it gives you chuck it up, you throw it up on your website or throw it up on LinkedIn and you're done. No, you still need someone to edit. You still need someone to actually look for like fact checked. If you're writing an article that requires, pricing on products or, scientific medical research, right? Things like this, the tool does not do that. Okay. It gives you it will just pull data. So the way that the Jarvis team explain it is they've preloaded the software with 10% of the internet. That's what they've said. So I don't know how much content that is, but up until 2019. So anything after 2019 till now, right, you won't find. Okay, so so if you're looking for like the latest research on small business or freelancing trends in the last 2 years, it can't give you that. Like it's not going to give you that data. And any data that comes out from a copywriting software right now, I would 100% check to see if it's accurate. And you're going to need someone to research that. The tool can't do it for you. And also in terms of grammar, and remember I said one of the things I wanted to help with was grammar. The tool, like Jarvis specifically, and Copy AI doesn't do grammar. Like it will just give you text, it will give you sentences, but you still need to run it through another tool. So I use a tool called Grammarly Pro, which does this, which actually then cleans up the spelling and the grammar for you. Okay, so there's almost a combination of tools. And then the third thing I would say is for those of you who are interested in SEO and search engine optimization and making your articles rank in Google, the tool has like a keyword feature, which means put a keyword in there and it will write about that keyword, but it doesn't optimize and it doesn't do anything in terms of connecting with Google database and whatever it is to actually give you, here's this article will help you rank. It doesn't do that. Okay, so I actually use another AI tool called Surfer.seo or Surfer SEO that does that for you. All right, so there's a combination of tools that help to get the end result. And so I've been able to publish articles, been able to write and publish. So let me start with rewind. It used to take me 4 hours of writing a draft, another couple of hours of writing, and then editing, and then maybe 1 hour to publish. So let's say about 10 to 12 hours per article. Now, okay, the drafting phase, instead of 4 hours, I can do within 30 minutes to an hour. Okay, so that's a big time saving.
Yeah.
Right? So the editing stage stays the same. I still need the editing time. That doesn't change, right? But also now that I've integrated Surfer SEO into the mix and Grammarly, right, I've essentially cut down my editing time or the grammar editing down by like 80% on time. And then for for search engine optimization, Surfer SEO actually helps me optimize the article, and I can do that. Takes me about an hour to do that using that tool. Okay, and then I've had articles rank right within the fastest has been in 2 weeks posted it on a site. Within 2 weeks, it's on page 1. And I've had other results like second page and whatever it is. I'm still exploring the SEO side of it, but that's kind of what it does.
So in terms of like the benefit and where this sits, so clearly it cuts down on that initial drafting. Would you say would you say it's good for exploring, like getting ideas?
Yes.
Because it strikes me that like the way that when I'm listening to this, I'm like, obviously I wouldn't trust like plugging something in and then posting it. But I kind of feel like, let's say if I was given a subject that I'm not super familiar with and I want to get a whole bunch of ideas out, I might plug it in, plug in certain keywords just to see what would come up to spark things and maybe like pick the best bits of different ones. Is that how one should think about this right now, aside from maybe the time saved in terms of the early drafting phase, or is there another, or are there other benefits?
Correct. So the way that I've heard it phrased, or the way I like to use it, is to explain it to people. Think of it as your assistant, and you're still the boss, right? So it will do the junior level things. It definitely doesn't replace the copywriter. It spits words out, and but you're still in charge of making sure that it's excellent copy, that the language, if you have, like I write for an Australian audience sometimes, for some of my clients, it doesn't do Australian language, right? Like if I want it to have Australian words and jargon, doesn't do that. Okay. So I need to still tweak for that. If you're in a specific niche or in a specific languaging that needs to be used, and your reader's level is, let's say, advanced. Okay. So they understand if you throw out the word SaaS, right? You don't need to explain to your readers that means software as a service. They know that. Yeah. Okay. Jarvis doesn't know that. It just puts out words, right? So you have to kind of tweak for that. Now, what it does do, it helps with writer's block. So like you say, Rob, coming up with ideas, brainstorming. It helps with rephrasing sentences. So you can actually say things in a better way than you might say it, all right? Or much more polished, right? It helps with, for me, it helps with my day-to-day job as a writer, but I still rewrite a lot of what it writes. Okay. And it's a long way from replacing, a high quality copywriter. What it can replace, and I've warned people about this, is the junior level writers who putting their gigs up on Fiverr and saying, I'm a writer and I'll write content for you. And those people, who are kind of coming in the door, I would actually say that they would probably benefit from using a tool like Jarvis to actually improve their workflow and their quality. Yeah.
Interesting. Really interesting. So like it's a space that I certainly haven't had experience with. And I think a lot of people, they've been reading about it and they don't necessarily understand, when you say AI powered, whatever, I always, first thing is the eye roll. Second thing is to look at it carefully. Right. But I think that it's, what's been really helpful to hear is, yes, these things are getting better. They're getting a hell of a lot better than they were. And I love how you broke down the flow of how you write an article, or how an article gets from idea to posting, and where this fits in, especially with the other tools that you mentioned. So thank you so much for kind of going over it and talking about it a little bit.
Yeah, all good. I hope people learn from this.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was super helpful, and also just learning a bit about your background as well. I think that's just there's a lot of it's an overused word, but there is a lot of inspiration out there that is vacuous and just focusing on making it or breaking it. And I think that it's so refreshing to hear a little bit more about how you can listen to yourself, you can listen to your body, you can listen to what it is that you do well, and be okay with the idea of figuring it out in a really kind of reflective and deliberate manner. And that's what I certainly respect in terms of everything that you put out about your own journey. So yeah, thank you so much, Anfernee, for taking a few minutes out of your day or evening to chat. If anybody would like to check out Anfernee's podcast, it's called Authentic Influence. Great name and quite apt. And you can connect with him on LinkedIn. You can also check out simplecreativemarketing.com. Anfernee is also very generously providing a free case study guide, as well as a 10% discount off of anyone's first done-for-you case study. You can read all about that by going to simplecreativemarketing.com/DCD. So you can get that too. That should also be in the link below. Thanks again, Anfernee, and have a good evening.
Appreciate it. And keep doing what you're doing.
Thanks.
Thanks, Rob.
Take care.